All right, welcome everyone to this PUD Board of Commissioners meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, well, I'd be looking for a
motion to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 4.
And I second.
motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, we will now move into some audience comments. So if you are in the audience and you would like to make some comments, please come up to the podium. And if you could keep your comments to about 3 minutes or so, that would be awesome. Unless you're Jenna, then you can talk as long as you want.
I appreciate that. Just 2 days of public comments. I appreciate it. Okay, I'm Jenna Freeble, Executive Director of the Drainage Consortium. I feel like you guys know me. Our member districts, like you guys, have publicly elected commissioners. They're special purpose dike drainage irrigation improvement districts. And we cover about 60,000 acres collectively in the Skagit and Samish deltas. So I just wanted to thank you guys for the seasonal transfers. I see that it's on your agenda today. They're working great. Last year, we're excited about this year. And as you guys are talking about seasonal transfers, I just wanted to put in a plug that we believe this is great and look forward to longer term agreements with you in the near future. So I wanted to appreciate that. And then, as you're, I think a lot of people may be asking for water. It's water for ag is tough. And our hope is that you would continue to prioritize working relationships with the irrigation districts as you start to think about how you accommodate what I'm sure is going to be lots of questions and requests for water as things continue to get more and more tough economically. And, seasonally, the droughts seem to keep coming. And so just thanks for your time and wanted to put in words of appreciation and thanks for the partnership.
All right. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right.
Good afternoon. I'm Tony Wisdom of Skagit Valley Farm, and I represent one of the 3 recipients of one of the seasonal water transfers for the year. And so I wanted to thank the PUD again publicly for that and sort of expand a little bit on that. We went through the first year last year. It worked fantastic. We recently re-upped for a second year of that. I think that's in process. And as a user of water and an irrigator for crops, which in my slanted opinion, I suppose slightly, bring a ton of value to everybody in Skagit Valley. And keeping farmland productive, I'm hoping will be one of the top priorities of the PUD moving forward. And so I'm also thanking you, but also ringing the bell that we need more water. We, as the conditions in the climate require, we need more water to be able to irrigate more crops. One of the challenges we're faced with as producers is not having a big variety of crops to grow. And so having access to water helps identify and bring forward crops that maybe could be contemplated in Skagit that haven't been before, but they have to have water to do that. And so it's critically important. So the use of water, the access to water, and the volume of water is super important for us. So as we continue to move forward in the transfer process, and as Jen alluded, in the sort of the available bucket, we hope that the PUD will continue to place a high emphasis and priority on agricultural use.
All right. Thanks, Tony. Other comments? And if you're online and you'd like to make a comment, please use the raise your hand function. Not seeing anyone there. All right. Excellent. So now we can move on to some old business. George.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. Good afternoon, everyone. I wasn't at the last meeting, so I will start by providing an update of what I was doing while I was absent from the last meeting. So I was a representative of Skagit PUD at the rally that the Washington PUD Association had in Washington, D.C. It was to discuss water and power issues. It was in conjunction with the American Public Power Association. They'd held their rally at the same time. So there's a lot of discussion about power. A lot of our meetings had to do with power issues, electrical issues. But, a few years ago, I think 3 years ago, the PUD Association started including water in those meetings. So this is the third year I attended, I think, so far. And so, we got to meet with Senators Murray, Senator Cantwell, almost all of the congressional representatives from Washington State. So there are multiple meetings set up. Some of them overlapped, but there was a team for each meeting that WAPUTA had scheduled, and I was in a number of them talking about water issues. And so things, just to fill you in, things that I discussed that were on WAPUTA's list of topics included a low-income assistance water program. So there was a program for low-income assistance for water started in COVID. And that was, I think $1 billion or something back then. That program ran out in 2023. And so since then, we've been trying to encourage DC to start that program again to make it equivalent to the low income energy assistance program, LIHEAP. And so it hasn't been successful in the last couple of years. We went again this year. We did the same thing, asked for that program to be started again. Funding's a challenge everywhere in Olympia, in DC, and I'm sure every other state. But the message was sent that a low-income assistance program would be helpful. We get emails pretty consistently from customers that are interested in something, and unfortunately, we just have to tell them that there aren't any programs available by the state or by the feds. And so it's not a great answer to give, but that's the truth. But we are trying to encourage our elected officials to start that program again. So that was one thing. The other main thing that I discussed was continued support for federal funding for water infrastructure. The SRF program is something that we've leaned heavily on. We spent quite a bit of money on the transmission line, $40 million, and a lot of that was through SRF loans. And they were really valuable to us. So we were a good recipient of those loans because we are good at spending the money on large capital projects. But there's funding needed for culvert relocation programs, PFAS issues that other water utilities have, cybersecurity. That's something that comes up more and more all the time. And there's a lot of water utilities that don't have the resources available to protect themselves. So they typically allot about $3.2 billion annually for state revolving funds. And there's just a fear that some of that funding will get stripped away into other programs. So trying to encourage them to keep that program viable. I'll talk about that in a second, but we go to the state revolving fund to try and get money for our projects. And so that program is really important to us. So those are the two main things that I talked about. Electrical PUDs have a number of issues. There's a Columbia River Treaty. There's, trying to thin out trees along their right of way so they don't start wildfires. Regulations for who attaches to poles. And then I think the biggest thing we talked about was streamlining permitting to try and get more resources online before, things like coal plants and other things go offline. As an example, Watkin PUD's starting or trying to look into geothermal. There's a geothermal project that they're looking at on Mount Baker and just starting the process for permitting something like that. It's been 3 years and they've really gotten nowhere. And so to bring things online is a huge challenge. I think the estimate to get a new transmission power line up and running is like 20 years, which is insane. And so they really pushed a lot of those issues. So, it's helpful to meet with our representatives and for them to see us there. They've gotten to get familiar with the faces. And so, that's what I did. I don't know if there's any questions about that specifically. No. So that was DC. Olympia, I think Kevin updated you about our budget request for Olympia as a short session. Their capital budgets are out. We did not make either of the budgets for our projects, but we were awarded $750,000 from the Public Works Board for some pre-construction money for our Panorama tank. And I'll get to that in a second. So that, at least that was some good news. Last year, we submitted an application for a grant from the EPA for our generator at the water treatment plant. We're still waiting to hear from that. Originally, the timeline was April or May, but with government shutdowns, there's less resources available to process those things. So I don't have an updated timeline on that. It might be later, but it's still there. Continuing on with funding, Kevin and I worked last week to submit a community project funding request to Congressman Larson's office, so an earmark, and we asked for $2.5 million for the Panorama storage tank. That's a great infrastructure project. Congressman Larson's on the infrastructure committee federally, and so they reached out to us actually to ask if we had any projects that we could submit on. And I think we submitted a really strong application for that Panorama storage tank. We were able to secure support letters from a number of different agencies. Senator Wagner submitted a support letter for us. Skagit County Commissioners, City of Mount Vernon, City of Cedar-Woolley, and SCOG also wrote support letters for us. So we have a really strong application. In addition, we did get the pre-construction money from Public Works Board, so it shows that there's broader funding agencies that are supporting this as well. Those earmark applications usually take a lot longer to kind of flesh out. It's usually almost a year before you actually get a decision on whether they're included or not, but we did apply because we're going to need money for them. Any questions on that? Or anything? Okay. Going back to the Public Works Board award of pre-construction funds. So Nick, can you turn to page 25 in the packet? So we got an award letter from the Public Works Board, and it's for $750,000. This is just the award letter. It has a few terms in it. The important one is that the interest rate is 1.06% for 5 years. That's a really good rate. And I think there's incentives if we pay it off early, which we have done on other awards that we've got from them for the transmission line project. So there's an opportunity to bring that rate down a little bit. I'm not sure exactly how much, but this is for pre-construction money. So it would allow us to finish the design and for permitting. So prior to getting to construction. What we've been requested is to, before we get the contract, they want a response from me that we would accept the award. So my plan would be to, unless there's an objection, to respond so that we can get the contract. So respond with a positive that, thank you for the award. We'll get the contract back with all of the terms. And I think there's still an opportunity to back out of accepting even at that point. So unless there's an objection, my plan is to respond to the Public Works Board and let them know that we're going to accept the pre-construction loan so that we can get the contract. Then that contract will be put on an agenda for the board to approve in full if we wanted to go through with it.
Just a clarification question on the timing of spending.
Okay.
So do we have to wait to start the spending for those activities before or after we accept and all the terms are laid out? How does that work?
So they put a date of February 20th, and the approval date is the award date. So we have from that date forward.
For the application,
Yeah.
then, okay.
So any costs incurred, I think after February 20th are eligible for reimbursement.
Okay, so if we move forward with the Panorama storage tank design today, then
We can start
all of that
applying.
would start. Okay.
Yep. So unless I don't necessarily need a motion, we're not approving the contract, but unless there's any objections, I'm just going to go ahead
Just
and,
a head nod.
yeah, and then let them know that we'll accept
Great option, yeah.
and then we'll get the contract and we'll get that on an agenda for approval.
What is our estimated, just like ballpark, I see that to get to 100% design and the other support services are around, almost 400,000. And then that doesn't include the actual permitting costs. Do we feel like 750?
It's more than enough. I don't know if we'll spend all of it.
Okay, that was yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Great.
good to have that cushion, but yeah,
Yeah.
we may end up returning some of it for not spending, just
It's
depending on
only
those.
for pre.
It's only for pre-construction.
Okay.
The next cycle for construction loans is going to be this fall, but the amount available is going to be dependent on the state budget to see if there's any budget available for loaning up for more programs. So that's a program that is, especially in Olympia, typically gets diverted to other needs. And so we're lucky we got this. If we start spending on it, I think that's good. If we can start the reimbursements coming in, but there's no guarantee that there'll be money even available to apply for construction. We'll cross our fingers and hope there is, but yeah, we'll see. All right. And I know Mike's going to talk about a couple things. Is that true, Mike? Okay. We are going to do a small operations update. We were not sure if we had everything in place.
Good afternoon, everybody. Been a while. I'm not sure what Mark talked about, but this is mostly just kind of an update on what we kind of have going on the first couple months. I've been going for the last month, but going through the items we asked for in this year's budget, things we started on this year so far. So kind of going down the list of the asks that we have, the calibrated meters so we can do our own mainline meter testing that is on order. The chlorine analyzers, actually they're chlorine injectors for all the satellite systems. Those actually showed up on the dock today. The DOH drain modifications, we finished the last one of those last week to satisfy some of the remedies that DOH wanted us to do for our drain lines on our reservoirs, air gap those. The other things the other things in white we'll be getting to later on as the year goes on. The ones in yellow are the ones kind of basically in progress right now. A couple of the vehicles have showed up already out of the vehicle replacement program. Mainline meters, we're working on those as a project with engineering. I think Brian's going to meet with Mark Semrau some more on that. Annual cleaning and inspections, that's an annual every year thing. Dukes Hill Pump, we're getting a power analysis done right now. Potlatch is going in next week, so that integration money will be going to that. Well replacement's just a placeholder. Getting new quotes on a flail mower this week. Water treatment plant, corroded electrical. KC's working on that this week. Did one yesterday. There's some pictures following all these kind of items we're talking about here on what's going on right now. Control valves are a 7-year cycle project. Filter media is on order. Got a train load of anthracite coming. Then down at the bottom, the piezometer data loggers, that project is 75% complete as well. So just kind of going down the list of things we're currently working on. So the treatment plant, we are testing an ALMA valve on one of the 5 SRD pumps and trying to get away from the hydraulically controlled pumps, valves that don't close completely at times and allow water to run backwards back to the river when they do fail. We're going with a more standardized motor control valve. We're testing one of those in the next couple of weeks before we start the SRD. I don't know if you've seen the chart, if there's attached in this week's notes or not on the reservoir. We've been holding a pretty good level at the reservoir all year. We've been pounded a lot of water this winter through I think the automation of Gilligan has helped quite a bit. We haven't lost kind of our typical thing. There's a graph here coming up as well. I think that we've been very fortunate this winter on rain so far. And again, the electrical panel and the piezometers, I'll get through here in some pictures. So if you look on the left picture there, that's the hydraulic valve that's on the SRD motors right now and the pumps. It's a big old hydraulically controlled box with piping and plumbing going to it from that big gray box and pressure transmitters. It takes water from a pressurized pump to open and close the valves. Picture on the right is going to a standard, what we call an ALMA valve. It's going to be a more positive feedback controlled motorized valve and get rid of the hydraulic, let's say 10 different places of failure versus one here. And we're just going to hope it works. If this works, we're going to replace the other 4 as well. But we're going to test this one out this year, starting in April. And you see the graph, the goldish line on top is where we're at this year so far. And you can see what it's compared to last winter. And we started out about 455 last year, if you look clear to the right. end of the winter, going into the winter. And right now we're still basically either holding or gaining on what we're putting out. So we got a little bit higher elevation right now than we held last winter. And you can see the green bars are basically how much water we are impounding from the streams. So been doing pretty good over the winter. So right now we're only down at 350, 456, I think. And we're spill is 465. So we're technically down 8 or 9 feet. And we're hoping to turn the pumps on in April and top the reservoir off completely. Hopefully in April, if we can get 3 or 4 pumps going, we should be sitting pretty good going into summer. And that one of the projects I was talking about, the electrical upgrades, you look at the panels on the wall there, those are all 90s vintage electrical panels. New ones sitting on the left or on the floor. So Casey and Rob and Riley been working on those this week. You can kind of see the condition of them. The pans are rusty. The contacts are rusty just from years of being down there in that environment. They're corroded, and we've put it as a placeholder the last few years to get these replaced. It's just getting a matter of time and getting enough people there. So the last couple of days, they've been working on replacing those electrical panels, which requires shutting down the plant. You're having the plant down and trying to swap out an entire, not just like doing your 200 amp service at home. It's that times 4 with all those rigid conduit and all that. So they've been, got one done yesterday. There's the other 3, and I think the one in the middle got done today. So there's the 2 new ones that got put in out of the 3. So a tremendous amount of work in one day's time to swap out one of those entire panels while the plant's down. So finally got that project going, and they're knocking those out this week. The piezometer project, that was one of the last things I talked about, is all the piezometers around the dam basically just had a metal box on them and an open tube in the top. This is the automation that we put in the budget the last couple of years, and this year we've done it. So the crew, Cody and Jarrett, went around and basically built concrete monuments around every one of the piezometers on both dam locations. I can't remember how many there are, 30 to 40 of these things. Jay, do you remember how there was? 38. Different various locations, and they put concrete bases at the bottom and put tubes on top, and then hung this hardware. So these new data logging instruments are hung in every one of these tubes, and are going to a radio network and transmitting that data now back to the treatment plant, rather than somebody coming out once a month and walking up and down the hill with a tape and hand measuring these things. These are all automatically logging the data and reporting it back to the plant. So that'll give us trendable data rather than like a once a month grab sample. So if there's any leakage in the dam, plus it's better reports for the dam survey and things like that for the regulatories. So they went around and basically poured these bases at every one of these things and mounted hardware. And now they're going and putting all the transmitters in and the radio gear and getting them all fired up. I think about 75% done on that. Some of the radio gear still needs to be done, but that's going to be a good improvement all the way around. Amelia's finished the first round of proficiency testing at the lab for Department of Ecology. That all went really well. And she was successfully elected as a trustee in the December election. So now she is a trustee on the Northwest AWWA board, and she's heading up the water quality group for the next 2 years, overseeing research, water resources, water quality, and treatment. So she's already getting phone calls. She doesn't actually take her position until after the conference in May, but she's already getting stuff handed off to her from these groups seeking some guidance and all that. So she's getting incorporated already, taking off the ground running here. Doing really good. Maintenance crew, kind of the wintertime stuff, doing valve maintenance, kind of fixing some of the ones in the street that have been left in despair, fixing valve cans, go out and replacing some broken valves. Catching up on stuff that there's not time for in the summertime when it's really heavily intense on other things. They're resolving some of the DOH repairs like I was talking about. There'll be a couple pictures coming up on the drain modifications we did. Typical service leaks, main breaks, tie-ins, developer stuff. And we've recently hired 2 maintenance staff, Colton Hordick and Ryan Dennis, which I think will probably be introduced at the all staff here coming up as well. They started last week, I believe. It was their first full week. A couple of new maintenance guys. So on this picture here, you can see on the right-hand side, and that fresh gravel is the drain valve that drains the 5 million gallon reservoir at Eaglemont. It drains into that catch basin into a 5-foot manhole, basically, with an overflow in it. The Department of Health wants everything air gapped, so there's no way something can crawl up that drain, even though there's a closed valve right there. They don't want anything that can crawl up those pipes because the overflow inside the tank also spills into the downstream side of that valve. So technically, if something crawled up the pipe, it'd have to go up 30 feet and get its way into the tank. Anyway, they wanted things air gapped and visible. This one would have taken quite a project to do. And if it was air gapped 2 or 3 feet above that catch basin, then we wouldn't be able to get the last 2 or 3 feet of water out of the tank if we were needed to. So we bargained with them and got a check valve, which was one of the budget items. I think I asked for a $10,000 or $11,000 check valve. That was installed in that manhole last week. It's the upper part right there. It basically has a self-closing check valve inside that circular ring. You can see there, it's about a 3-foot piece, goes into the drain line, anchored to the inside of the manhole. That way nothing can crawl up in there, but it also will allow the tank to drain and satisfies the DOH. So kind of an innovative way around what they wanted us to do, but they checked off on it. So worked out well for us, a lot less work and a lot easier to do. Plus we can still drain the entire tank. Meters are down to less than 2,600 regs left to change. We're hoping to get that done in the next 2 to 3 months. Hopefully get the last of the 5/8 meters done. And again, the test meter was one of those yellow things on the budget. The first thing I talked about up there, so that's on order, so we can start testing our own meters this year. The potlatch skid is in our yard, and we're going to install the new potlatch RO plant next week. That's the plan, starting Monday. Another, again, one of those lines on the thing. The chlorinators showed up today for the satellite systems. We're changing out all the chlorine injection pumps at all the satellite systems and potlatch, which is a satellite system as well. And then Cascade Ridge is our next big SCADA project. We're going to be putting Starlink up there and redoing all the control panels and probably the pumping scenarios up there. I think we're going to put pumps and VFDs up there. So if we ever have to take a tank out of service right now, we don't really have any way to keep the people in water. So I think as part of this process, we will put in controls and variable frequency drives on the pumps so we can take tanks out of service if need be. As water availability gets harder and harder, if you ever take things out of service, it's harder to keep people out of water or in water in situations like that. So this might end up being a little bit bigger project than we first anticipated. Set ourselves up for the future anyway. Any questions so far? I know I'm going kind of fast here. This is the existing potlatch RO plant. If you looked in the building right now, you look at the skid, that's both those membranes. The membrane tubes are 6 membranes a piece. Plant puts out 20 gallons a minute of finished permeate, 60 gallons a minute goes through the plant, 40 gallons of reject basically. It's got a 40 horsepower positive displacement pump on the left. You can barely see the blue semicircle on the left next to the pre-filtered cartridge there. So this is the existing plant size-wise. This is looking at it from the other end. You see a big 40 horse motor right there and a big positive displacement pump, big old belt driven pulley system and all that runs the RO plant. Here's the variable frequency drive, 40 horsepower drive on the left. It converts single phase to 3-phase to drive the motor. Harmonic conditioner on the left that keeps people's TVs working when the 40 horse motor is running. That is now all replaced with, this is the new skid that has all that same stuff already on it. This skid has 4 membranes in that bottom membrane vessel that'll put out 12 to 13 gallons a minute and about a 35 to 40 gallon a minute flow rate through it. That pump on the bottom of the skid right there replaces that big old monstrosity pump that was in the last picture. And that little gray box in the middle replaces that 40 horse VFD, and that harmonic conditioner was in the last picture. That's how things have changed over 30 years. So that plant will put out just roughly 5 or 6 gallons less than the other plant, and it's 2/3 the size maybe. So less membranes, less cost, self-cleaning. A lot of components will be coming out of that building and a lot smaller footprint now going in. So we're excited to get that done next week, hopefully. Everything will go well. Part of the fleet, 2 of the vehicles have showed up already. This is a new Explorer for the engineering staff over here to replace the early 90s, one of the early 90s Explorers that we're still driving. and a truck to replace a 2018 truck that we're going to get back to, send back to Enterprise that we're paying lease fees on. So while it's still got a lot of positive equity in it. And I received notice late this afternoon that we ordered a 2026 Nissan. It missed the cutoff for ordering date. They're going to order us a 2027 with no additional cost. They're going to charge us the same rate. We're going to get a newer model year. It's just going to take a little bit longer to get it. And that's it for a quick update. Unless there's any questions.
Well
No,
done. Thanks.
thank you.
Yep.
All right, so some new business here. Recommendation for an award going on this Panorama storage tank.
All right, thank you. Got some good news about that loan for the pre-construction services. Just a couple of highlights to go along with the memo. This project is, as you know, a restart of the project that we had canceled earlier. Part of its objective is to back up the clear wells. That's a new additional kind of design criteria, and we're going to be balancing that with the future North Cedar Woolley tank project. There are some new design elements that go along with this project. There are wider road. The W1 pump system is now complete, so we're designing a connection to the W1 pump system and not the W1 pump system. We're attaching to the clear wells so that we can back them up. And we're looking at the outfall to the Judy Reservoir, whether or not that's something we can or cannot do based on the interpretation of waters of the state laws. And then, of course, there are some updated geotechnical requirements that we need to look at and some seismic considerations that may need to be designed into the tank. We're going to do some extra geotechnical work just to determine if there is that need, and then if there is, we'll incorporate it into the design. Other contracts that we are going to sign in the future are include the geotechnical contract. We think that's going to be about $30,000 in that neighborhood. That's an estimate. There will be some SCADA reprogramming of the W1 pump system to fill the tank. That will be about $80,000 is our estimate there. And then just on as a note, Mark Summerall has done some great work with PSC to apply for an energy efficiency grant related to the W1 pump system, and we're hopeful to get some funding grant money on the tail end of that project. So right now we're looking for approval to move forward with this project. If you have any questions.
Just a couple clarification questions, which George has already spoke to. So I just want to put that out there. We have talked about it already being at 90% design,
Yes.
and that we are paying for 90% design again, but that is because the scope and design is changing due to the W1 system connection and whatnot. So
Right.
just something that I think is important to point out, just because it seems like we already paid to get to 90% and yet, and then just thank you for pointing out the redundancy of the clear wells to address some storage issues in Cedar Woolley, because this is really a multifaceted project that is beneficial to not only our plant, but the future of hopefully the lack of gaseous chlorine and also storage for Cedar Woolley. So with that, I motion to authorize the general manager to execute the professional service contract with Concern North American Inc. in the amount of $392,530 for design services related to the Panorama storage tank project.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, Mark. All right, now, are you also pitching the adoption of the resolution to approve the waiver?
I am.
Awesome. Let's hear it.
This is for, is it Family Promise? Family Promise. Yeah, sorry. I wrote the memo. So we've approved a couple of these in the past. This project is in Cedar Woolley. It's transitional housing for, I think, 14 families, and they're renovating a property. This is funding. It's kind of procedural for us. We waive the connection fees through resolution, and we actually get those fees reimbursed directly from the county through this CHIP funding program. And so we are seeking approval of the attached resolution so that we can move forward with this project. They can move forward with the project and we can get our fees reimbursed.
I'd make a motion to adopt resolution 2319-26, approving the waiver of connection fees paid by Family Promise.
I second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Outstanding. So now, George, let's talk about the future temporary seasonal water rights transfer. Are you going to lead that discussion for us, or?
I'm going to have somebody well more qualified
Oh,
than
okay.
myself to talk about it. Bill Truman's in the audience. Why don't we call on him?
All right.
Come on down.
It'll probably be a group effort depending on how the conversation goes. But yeah, Bill's going to lead.
Outstanding.
Is that no good?
Good afternoon.
Yeah, so today, this is a discussion. At the beginning of the year, if you'll recall, there was a approval of the water rights transfers for the two dike districts and Skagit Valley Farms. There were comments earlier in the meeting today about that. So the transfers that are going to occur this year in 2026 are established with one minor caveat that I'll talk about as we move on. Start the conversation in preparation for 2027 and beyond. A little closer. Okay. We have a little bit of time. We want to be proactive, get through this subject and have a plan for 2027. So today, the bulk of the time, I'm going to give a presentation, catch us up on where we've been, where we're coming to now, and then some ideas to ponder about where we might be in 2027. And we plan to have more discussions, likely at the next commission meeting. We'll talk about it again. So quite a bit of talking from me today, but at the end, there'll be some time to talk about it. But there's a lot of material to cover, a lot of ideas, and it's not going to be covered today. There's not enough time for it. So just to kind of cue it up, the thought on this discussion. So quick recap. As all of us know, water rights are very complicated, complex business. Judy Reservoir water system is no different. We have almost a dozen different water rights. As with all water rights, there's limitations on withdrawal rates, annual volumes. There's junior and senior water rights. We have the MOA that resulted in a lot of those aspects of those water rights. So there's a lot going on. And that suite of water rights, that's the primary purpose of those water rights, is to serve that pumped system. And with water law, there's a lot of changes. Nothing stays the same. Case law is changing interpretation of law and how ecology regulates as we go on. And there's things that we are monitoring. There's a few things that are of concern to water utilities. The WUC, the Washington Water Utility Council, we're involved with that. There's a water rights committee, a subcommittee under that council, and they are monitoring a couple different things with ecology, especially this concept of pumps and pipes water rights that we've talked about over the years. The short answer to it is many municipalities like the PUD have water rights that have not been fully put to use yet, but we have certificates for them. In normal water rights, that doesn't occur, but because of the growth nature of public water systems. It was protected in 2003 in the municipal water law, but there's still actions and activities from ecology that concern, especially the WUC, and with policy revisions to how ecology sees certain aspects of processing water rights. So there's some level of insecurity just for us to observe as time goes on, and that we're watching with those water rights. So it's a complicated business, and we have a large water system to feed through those water rights. Another short recap with Judy Reservoir. We have the two sources. We have the river, we have the streams, and they vary by availability. We could pump with the river all year round, but electrical costs are significantly more in the wintertime. The streams are available only in the winter, so there's that complementary use of those sources. And Skagit River has very high quality water, especially in the summer, late summer. And so that's very good to bring into our water system. Normally in the summer, before the transfers of the last several years, we would be running 2 pumps at the pump station in order to maintain. Mike Fox showed in his presentation. I'll have a couple quick looks at those curves that we like to look at related to Judy Reservoir. Normally, we try to hold ground through the summer with 2 pumps, and that's about 15 million gallons a day. In the summertime, usage is, the peaks can get up to the 15, the average is 11. So we hold ground through the summer in general, our normal ops. And then back to the water rights and their primary purpose for Judy Reservoir. Population growth is still happening at a pretty good pace in Skagit County. Mark Semrau talked at the last meeting about how per capita water use is decreasing. So the trends of water use are not following population growth, but over time they still will increase. And so it is something that we need to be aware of with those water rights as we move forward to be able to provide that source to the pipe system. So this graph, what I want you to focus on is the green portion. That's a 5-year period before the last 2 years. And it's a good image of, towards the left, that's in the winter, the first part of the year. Usually the levels are fairly high. The streams vary as they're getting water. And then when summer comes, fairly level throughout the summer and fall with the pump station running with a couple pumps. We'll talk more about the last 2 years a little bit later. So over the last 3 years, I'll step back just a step. We started transferring water, a really quick recap, in 2015, the extreme drought that occurred. At that point, we provided emergency transfers to these 2 irrigation and drainage districts, 22 and 15. We did that again in 19 and another year or 2 before the last 3 years, where we had this pilot program of transferring each year. This is the 3rd year that we're coming into. And it included those 2 districts and Skagit Valley Farm, a private farming company that had been using water at this specific field in part from our piped water system, which was nearby. They also have a water right that's interruptible, so they were unable to use it in the summers, in the middle of the summer, similar to the irrigation districts. So rates were established by the commission for this 3-year pilot with 5% increases that have been occurring. This is the 3rd year of that agreement, so that will be final now, and that's why, again, we're starting to have this conversation now to discuss where we're going to move after this. One thing to remember, to point out, as a part of this agreement, the PUD, in discussions with the Swinomish tribe primarily, agreed to limit our withdrawals to only using 1 pump at the Skagit River pump station when the transfers were in play. And the idea was to be close to what the common withdrawals have been at the PUD. And so, as you see, that's about 7.5 million gallons a day, which is about half of what our system is using during the summer. Also, a thing that's been a good success, we have implemented using our own meters, and that's a part of the fee that is paid for that leasing to get those installed. They're telemetered, they go through the online portal, they've worked incredibly smooth, nothing but compliments from the regulators, not a hiccup, complete confidence really where we're at with that. It's just been a great success. So we plan to continue that. This is a quick summary. One thing also to keep in mind, we talk about two different units as we go, and the instantaneous rate, that's the most limiting as far as our water rights, and it's the most valuable to the irrigators also. Usually they want to get that instantaneous rate. So if, for example, in this table, I'm not showing the actual bucket of water, the annual quantity, those units, and that's what the rates are based on. So keep that in mind. Like the instantaneous rate's important for balancing needs across us and other potential users, but then the acre foot unit is best used for that, for the fees and the rates. So the total instantaneous that has been transferred is 13 cubic feet, 13.14 cubic feet a second, which equivalates to 5,900 gallons a minute. Just two different ways to look at it. Us water nerds bounce back and forth. We can't really stick with one. I don't know why. It's just pretty much impossible. So you can see the spread between Skagit Valley Farms and the two irrigation districts. This bar chart, I would focus mostly on the right. It's a little busy. I apologize for that. It's showing there's a bunch of different scenarios for the way we could pump water from the Skagit River. The yellow bar at the top, that's our overall water right limit. This is instantaneous. That's when all the Skagit River flow is above its in-stream flow levels. So that's our max in conditions where the river's up. The blue line, that's if we're in that interruptible situation we have uninterruptible rights, excuse me. The uninterruptible part, that blue line, so that's when the river's below, we can pump that no matter what the river level is. And kind of in the middle, you see the river 2 pumps. So that's depicting when 2 pumps are running at the Skagit River, we're pulling about 23 cubic feet per second. And then to the right, you can see the comparison. The far right would be 1 pump at the pump station. The orange is the consortium, both of those irrigation districts, and then Skagit Valley Farms. So it's pretty close to equivalent of running 2 pumps. We could run 2 pumps and still be below our legal water right. If you look, there's the white space between the two, but that's, again, pointing out our self-limitation through that agreement with the tribes. So that's resulted in, that's where you look at the last couple of years, you can see some of the impacts and how we have changed operations to a degree. So the red line is 2024. So as Mike was talking about, usually in April, because the electrical rates and the streams are drying up, we start to pump. So in 2024, we reacted ahead of time to bring the reservoir up as high as we could to prepare for only running 1 pump in the summer. In 2025, we had some operational challenges at the pump station, had a few hiccups there. There was some water quality, if I remember, in the very late spring, where we had to shut. When the river blows out, it's a pretty big water quality problem for us. So we lost some ground there. So you can see how it impacted us, and we're stuck with 1 pump through the summer. So draw is pretty low, but we were okay at the end of the day, but it was getting pretty low by the end of the summer. And then we turn the pumps on when the transfer ends, get our reservoir back. So that's been our reaction to the transfer in this current era. So I want to, as we get into talking about what's next, a reminder about the value of water rights. There is a value. We talked about a lot of this info, some of this info back in 23 when we first established the rights. And the top left is just an excerpt from a news article showing in Western Washington, a water bank, and Thurston County purchased a water right through that water bank for a pretty high price. That's per acre feet. That's a permanent purchase though, so it's not really matching up with what we're talking about today, but just a reminder about the fact there is active markets in play in Washington, mostly in Eastern Washington, but they are throughout the state for the leasing of water rights like the ones that we have. And the bottom right is an excerpt of a report analysis that Aspect Consulting did for us in 2023 as we were having the discussions about rate setting for the transfer that's currently in play. They had at that point provided an order of magnitude market estimate of values for this type of leasing, and they threw out $100 to $250 an acre foot as conceivable pricing. There's other ways to look at it, other types of information, but the main point is that there is a value there. And is that the right? Okay. Sorry about that. So this table, a little recap of the revenue that we did bring in from 2025. Again, that was year 2. You can see the volumes in acre feet and the gross revenue that came in. And then also of interest is looking at the weighted acre feet, dollars per acre feet on the far right. So there's a flat fee, a base rate in our rate structure, and that's shown at the top in the header line. Right now, or in 2025, it was $5,250 for the base rate. So that includes a chunk of water, 300 acre feet. It also includes the administrative lump sum to pay for our administrative time. And it also includes the 1 meter, the depreciated rate of the meter for that season. And then there's a unit cost for the volume over that. So it's more just for informational purposes. You can see there's a swing because of the magnitude of use. For example, Skagit Valley Farms use quite a bit less water. They're using the water differently. It's a different application. But if we're analyzing unit costs, you can see a pretty good swing because of the way that base rate affects it. Where, for example, Dike District 15 used the most amount of volume, so that weighted rate starts to go down. Another interesting metric that we looked at for informational purposes only, this is not showing the actual revenue that came in, but comparing those volumes in 2025 from a hypothetical situation, the revenue that would have came in related to some of those generic prices that Aspect Consulting was throwing out, where we had around 20,000 come in total, and you can see there it would be 84 to 200 on that range. And then the far right, really more for informational, because we are talking about a couple different animals, but the piped rate, that's the agriculture rate through our piped water systems, and what those volumes of water would have equated related to that kind of a rate, significantly more. The last thing I'd call out on that is Skagit Valley Farm, especially, again, previous to the transfers, had been significantly using our piped water that was able to help them out there. And I don't have the numbers offhand, and it wasn't at that rate at $50,000, but it was $20,000 to $30,000 a year, I think. It was right in that order of magnitude that they were using at that site. So this is the last slide, and again, this isn't a recommendation. It was just some ideas, some factors we thought if we started to think about what could be a future program moving forward. And one of the things would be qualifications, the types of users. One of the things I didn't talk, or I kind of glossed over or passed over quickly, we did have another farmer show interest when we were first putting together this pilot program in 2023. It was after we already had it in play. And because of that, we weren't able to entertain or talk to them through it anymore. But we did know of one. They had a water right, similar situation. They had an interruptible water right. They had a crop. They were looking for a way to be able to water their crop throughout the season. So there are situations like that out there. We haven't spent really much any time at all searching out the level of that. I've talked with Department of Ecology, the water master here in the valley, and they've told me of several other names of potential users that have interruptible water rights that might benefit from that. We also had come out of the blue, really. We had no idea that this was out there in the last month or two. Department of Fish and Wildlife and Department of Ecology are working on a habitat restoration program in the lower Skagit. And they are looking for water, temporary water, to irrigate the plantings. I don't know the scope of it, but they don't have a way to irrigate those plantings for that restoration project. So they've requested a similar transfer. It's very small. It's very minuscule. It's 20 gallons a minute, like a garden hose type of thing. And we're working through with them right now, talking the details of that. And we expect that likely is going to come in front of the board fairly soon to discuss that for this year. So there are likely other needs as we've suspected for that water. So and that's from really just looking at an agricultural type of use like we've talked about. So that if there was going to be a different type of program moving forward, there'd be aspects like that. I've talked with Ecology at length a bit about the subject of if they had to have a water right, their own water right, to be able to get a transfer from us, and that's not necessarily the case. The main measuring stick that Ecology will be using on something like this, if we were to put forth a different transfer, another transfer, they want to know that user's going to succeed, that the water we're giving them is going to succeed. What if we had to pull it back? They don't want to get them in a compliance problem or some kind of bind. And so beyond that, they don't have to have a water right. For example, again, on a pretty small scale, the Fish and Wildlife Project, they don't have a water right at all. And conceivably, this would work for them. So some of the ideas we threw around, again, you could spin this in a lot of directions, but potentially the water that we looked at in those tables, that quantity of water that we've so far identified to be able to transfer in this current era of the PUD with how we're using Judy Reservoir, the water system and its needs, you could break it into smaller buckets of water, if you will, and open that up to the public and have a way to, through some bidding or something like that, to be able to make it available to whoever's out there, whoever else might need the water. And there's things we'd have to work through, like the subletting part. There'd be complications with that potentially, because again, we're the middle person in between dealing with Ecology. It's not like if we had a full functioning water bank, we could deal with the water more, but every transfer we have to go through with Ecology. So it has to pass their tests. And so that would get complicated if we made it too complicated. And then one of the goals would be to, whatever we do, to have it set up the September before, or even earlier, as early as possible, to be able to allow whoever the user is, to prepare and react and know what's going to be set up. So I think I've covered how I was going to cover that. And our plan was to let this soak in. I'll turn this over to George at this point and any questions or how we want to continue. But the idea was, so let this soak in, think about it yourself, come up with ideas, and then we'll continue to have the discussions as we go, with the goal of getting to some kind of a solution that works fairly soon, later this year, later this spring and summer, really.
Thank you, Bill. Very thorough. Thanks for all the information. You know, we see this stuff multiple times, but it always brings up more every time you hear somebody explain it and maybe understand a different piece of it. But at this point, yeah, I think we're interested in maybe some first thoughts from the board members. And then maybe if there's questions or things that we can, other information that we can gather to help facilitate the conversation. Because the plan is to talk about it at the next meeting. Like, there's no reason not to talk about it right away at the next meeting. So, you know, Bill showed some data that we have, some statistics and graphs from Judy Reservoir. If there's other information that the board is interested in looking at and discussing, please let us know. We can gather that. We can make that available. But, you know, I don't know if it's maybe appropriate if you want to just go one by one and just do initial thoughts, and if there's questions that you have.
Bill, when we talk about longer term agreement, I think that was mentioned during the public comments. To you, what's the feeling out there? And, you know, this was a 3-year agreement. Are we talking a 5-year? What do you see as feasible?
Well, yeah, and Mark or George, feel free to jump in too. So the things change fairly slow with population growth and water use. And as far as those bigger trends, like, that's one of the things I think about. Where
probably more of a regulatory concern.
Well,
maybe ecology or something.
Yeah, just thinking about our first priority, which is feeding the Judy pipe system. And we do use our full instantaneous rate at other times of the year, like, and things change through there. So it has worked so far, but the longer you go out, if you're locked in, then it takes some of that flexibility away. That's one thing. Yeah, weather, you know, we can, if we have stream issues, we've had it's been a long time, and we've spent a lot of money making our stream intakes very resistant to storms and things like that. But in my tenure, even, we've lost Gilligan Creek at significant periods of time in the winter due to storm damage. And so that in the summers when you would make that up. So whenever you're taking some of that and setting it aside, it's a concern. So that's one thing. But this has worked okay, the 3-year.
Yeah, I would separate it into two groups. The short-term discussion about how long should this be, it's an annual discussion about operational concerns. So I think that's something that we'll have. When you think about long-term programs, we'd have to think about growth.
Yeah.
So, you know, right in front of us every year is, are we going to be able to turn the pumps on when we want? Are we going to get enough water from the streams? And will we be at a level that the transfers won't impact us? So I think that's an every year thing.
Yeah.
You know, even if we made it, just like this pilot program is 3 years, but we did look at it every year and brought it to the board for discussion and approval. And it's a prudent thing to do in the short term.
Yeah. I was going to go last, but so for me, I think what would be useful as I look at this, you know, so the water rights transfer has been like proof of concept. We proved it. It works, at least for the 3 people that we have. And so the WDFW interest being not as irrigators, it's similar, but in minuscule, like, right, it's very small, but it doesn't mean it'll stay that way. And so in my mind, it's now gone, the potential for expansion is there. And so the necessity is of us having some guidelines, right? So around the program, to be able to say it's been a project because we had to start and a stop and we could turn it off. But now we want to move into a program for which irrigators can rely, as Tony said, that they can move into, it's an economic decision. So what they're going to grow. And so to create some certainty around, this asset. And so for me, what's rattling around in my head is it sounds like it's totals and timing. It's almost like cash flow. It doesn't matter how much you have the total, it's when you have it. And so a better understanding of both, and of course everything's variable, but it seems like we know what the fixed total of the right is. And then so as a commission, we could decide, year to year based on whatever the need is, how big a bucket do we want to create for these transfers, and then allocate within that bucket the amount for irrigators and then other maybe nothing. And we may want to turn around and say, hey, if there's, and it may be junior to the irrigator bucket, because what we're saying is that we've made the decision that this, because we've proven the concept and there's all of the value that we've already determined in doing that, but to create some both a structure that we can make that decision and also that turns into certainty for the irrigators, right? And so that we would know the totals, we would run the numbers and say, so for this year, we anticipate this is how big the bucket is going to be. And then within that bucket, we can have the further discussion within the irrigators as to that who does what. I'm not super excited about the idea of bidding. But it's totally, it makes sense. And also, there's, we also do things that are more equitable, right? I mean, it costs more money to move water down McLean Road than it does down Main Street. So as a commission, as a district, we get to make some of those decisions, right? And so I guess for me, it really brings back, how big is the bucket? What's the timing? So the total and then the timing. And as you mentioned, I appreciate articulating the importance of keeping the priority one is we need to keep the Judy Reservoir full. And also we have an asset that is in demand. I think it's incumbent on us to figure out how we can really convert that into value for the district and the ratepayers.
Oh, sorry, I just had a question on your statement. So when you talk about how big of a bucket is available, Bill, or can you go back to that?
I can do it. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what
the bar chart.
You bet.
This is where my concern lies.
So
is
then-
the instantaneous for one pump already has been achieved or demanded by what our current base is with these two districts. Unless that agreement is allowing for that third instantaneous amount, that third pump worth of instantaneous amount up to. We've already assumed our instantaneous allocation.
Right.
In theory.
Right,
As of right now, we've already achieved the instantaneous amount. So I would not, unless there is more water to work with, I would not want to entertain adding to this group at all, because you're going to start curtailing other people that you've already allowed water to. Now you've created an actual water market. And I am not, this is, in my mind, this was an emergency plan for those who already had water rights, that already were experiencing having to, be curtailed by their own water right, not necessarily then being curtailed by us and not having certainty of having the emergency water right provided. So I don't want to put someone who's relying on
Right. That's the timing aspect.
That's the timing aspect.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right. So I think if there's an XY for me, it's totals and timing, right? And when they align, awesome, let's sell it. And when they don't, or when there's a risk on a risk adjusted basis, I think it's incumbent on us. And I rely on the district and the expertise to be able to say, here's, it's red, yellow, green, and we can be green on and making these commitments.
Yeah. So I guess the question I was going to ask, or clarification, was that, so the size of that bucket, so like you just said, so there's one pump
Mm-hmm.
that we agree to hold to on the far right chart, and so the the bucket is the difference, right? So
Mhm.
it's the 13.14 CFS. We don't have the ability to pump a half a pump's worth. Like we've got 5 pumps that are either on or off. So there's no variable speed drive on those. So if we have a pump, then I just want to clarify, the remainder of that bucket is that 13.14 CFS. It's, unless, I want to make sure I'm understanding your statement correctly. So that, like, how do you see that changing every year, or could it change?
No, it's just the timing of when that's available. Right. I think
Okay.
that's, and that gets to the variables. We just don't know how wet the winter's going to be. We don't know how turbulent the river's going to be. We don't know. And so and also where we can absorb some of that uncertainty, we should, but also we shouldn't at the risk of not being able to provide to the rest of the ratepayers. I think that's, so that this is super useful in terms of that. That's the timing. I think sometimes at least I can get caught up in totals when it's really more about timing, to be able to say there's a lot of water that is
That's still
going on.
left, unused, and yet the
It's-
instantaneous
it is.
need has already been accounted for. In theory, with that
Mhm.
one pump agreement.
Yeah,
pump.
for us, yeah. And then we set up the agreements, or have set them up, where the water is available for transfer through May 15th through September 30th. And we just assume that bucket is available during that whole time. So maybe that's what you're getting at. Is it needed from day one of the transfer through the last day of the transfer? Or is it just needed on portions of that time?
Periodically
Is that?
Yeah. Yes.
That-
Yeah.
okay.
Whereas we have the total instantaneous of between those dates, is that optimized, or are there other? And again, I hate getting cute and creative unless we need to,
Right.
because it adds complexity in an area that we're trying to reduce the complexity, because everything's dynamic. But and it's not a matter of I want to create massive amounts of science projects and reports. It's useful for me, at least, to have it, to see it like this, which is super great. I mean, I appreciate that. And then also to be able to say, it's locked down. We're going functionally to take that one pump offline during this time in order to move that water to irrigators.
And that's one thing we've looked at is, the meters have helped, the telemetry has helped, the amount of administration that we do. We're trying to keep that to a minimum. So we've done it where it's just, the transfers that whole period of time. You don't look at daily or weekly or monthly, but we've tried to keep that to a minimum. But then, it does create this situation. Yeah.
I think something that to me is really important is to look at our current policy and see how are we currently serving. Elected board, and so another way that we serve irrigators is through hydrant hookups, hydrant connections for temporary service. Something for me that's really important is, how does our current policy guide this discussion prior to us trying to make our own rules related as it relates to non-treated water service? Like, how does our current treated water service manual and who we service and how we service them guide that discussion, that we already have the framework that we may ask ourselves less questions and have less opinions about, and maybe we're already have a lot of questions answered through what our current policy actually addresses.
I agree with you there, because I think that narrows the scope of the discussion, because
does too.
if we open it and we've got people without water rights that want to, figure out a way to, who knows where, that, I think that's where,
Yes.
if you tried to make a market out of it, it could get.
It
really
gets,
weird.
yes. And I think the other part too, with Skagit Valley Farms, there's another section of our policy that's very clear that There's something about, system disturbances. Water services shall not be utilized in such a manner to cause severe disturbances or pressure fluctuations. And that's why Skagit Valley Farms was kind of added into this pilot project due to their use, their short-term water service with their temporary water service agreement utilizing the fire hydrants were causing pressure issues within the Cedar Woolley, that zone within Cedar Woolley. So again, they're all kind of like our current structure is linked together with our current policy. So I would love for that to guide, who is qualified and how we move forward, because I think we really can get in the weeds here. A lot of people need water. That is true. And it's our job to make sure that we are managing our water first to serve the best for the Judy system, and then what we can for those we've already identified that we are serving currently. So I just think that would help us narrow our scope a little bit as we move forward with this discussion.
What section were you looking at in those?
222, I believe 256 and 261. And then how it relates to our bulk water fill stations too. We did establish our bulk water fill stations for a reason. So we want to make sure that investment, we're not saying we're competing with current investments we've already made within our system. So
Yeah.
I just want us to be really careful in how we proceed.
What else?
It's complicated.
Okay, we do complicate it. As simple as we can.
Exactly. I think that's a great point too, keeping it as simple as we can while we move forward too, because we don't want to create a awesome multitude of discussions with ecology. And as you said, each and every water transfer you do, you're having to submit them. You can't do them as a collective grouping as a program. So it'll be a lot of work. I mean, that can explode pretty quickly.
Less if-then statements we have in any decision, the better it is for us.
Yeah.
So looking forward, so there's some things I wrote down that I think we could come up with some clarifications on or discussion about specific ones. Moving forward, do we want to kind of come up with like a framework of what something could look like and then pick that apart? Or are we still trying to gather information and feed what might come out the other end? Like there's one thing that we've talked about internally, like, and I think Bill had it in his last slide. You could come up with, okay, how do we figure out who wants it and then decide, well, how much is available for them? Or say, let's figure out how much is available. You can create smaller blocks and then just say, well, depending on how many people come, they could get small block or get multiple blocks or something like that. If you divide the bucket into blocks. So there's different ways of approaching this. It seems like, I think Bill had it first on the slide too, qualifications might be the biggest discussion factor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think qualifications.
So how to kind of narrow down the
Qualified participants.
people involved.
Yeah.
We have been talking to people. Maybe we do some more clarification on who may or may not be available. WDFW came out of the blue. That's true. We haven't made this on our own, like blasted the public with information that's available about this. I think we've had articles in the paper that talks about the transfers every year. I think it's narrow in saying that we are doing this, and we haven't like solicited requests or anything like that. I don't know if that's something that I'm just trying to throw out all ideas. Is that something that's of interest to the board?
I think the biggest thing that I'm interested in is who are we currently serving? Bulk stations, fire hydrant meters, and our seasonal transfers that we have done. Evaluate the demand on those, how they're being utilized. You don't want to overstep on either one, except for in the case of hydrant meters then where is our qualification as far as being open to a transfer as opposed to a hydrant? Is it only when it's to a detriment of our pressure zone? And that's when we are going to have to be really careful cost wise, and that discussion could go out of hand a little bit too. So I think the biggest thing for me is I want to see who is our current customer basis. If we agree, or do we agree that municipality is the first priority for a transfer for an emergency, that you have to have X, Y, and Z? So I guess the qualifications. How full is that bucket already? The timing and amount for that one pump? Are we limited to that one pump worth of transfers temporarily? Or are we up to two? So we need to know how much water we're working with, if we can even entertain that, if we come to the consensus that a municipal transfer is our priority first and foremost, prior to then subsequently X, Y, and Z if enough water remains.
I don't know if we want to talk too much about it, but the concession of going to one pump, just so the background on that, it's been a while since we talked about it. Originally, when we did the drought transfers in the declared emergencies from the state in 15, 19, 21, and 23, there were tidal restrictions. There were timing restrictions based on tides for the pumping. And so that's where the discussion came in of, well, how much do we normally use the SRD in the summer? And typically it was 2 pumps. Sometimes it was 3, sometimes it was 1, but the average is about 2. So we were able to eliminate the tidal restrictions by kind of staying within that kind of that same area of, okay, it's not 2 pumps from us, but it's 1 plus roughly the value of a whole nother pump. And so we were able to eliminate the tidal restrictions, which from what I heard, that was valuable to the irrigators. So getting or adding to that bar chart to get up higher would just have to reopen that whole discussion. And that might take a while and it might be challenging. I don't know where we would end up.
And then, I guess that's the full circle of the conversation. Are the current people that are being served by this transfer the priority for us as a board, based on our policy, based on what decisions we want to make policy wise? Because if that's the case and we don't want to reopen that conversation of tidal influence, then we may be capped at where we are right now. So
This could be a much more narrow discussion.
this could be a much more narrow discussion. So I think we really need to ponder that and figure out, do we want to open that tidal influence conversation up? Yes, no. And if the answer is
That's
no,
a big one. Yeah.
then the answer is no, then based on our current agreements, what are we going to prioritize? And I'm very much so on a municipal, it's very easy to defend a municipal to municipal agreement as opposed to going into the private sector of things and then saying any extra that we do have outside of this will go to those who, under our temporary transfer for hydrant use, impair our system in another manner. And in that way, we need to figure out how to make it equitable there. But I get really nervous opening up the title discussion. So
Think of one other potential municipality that could fit that description of impacting our system through irrigation.
Burlington.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that could be a large volume of water if that ever came.
If they have, and they do or do not have their own
Intake?
established. Yeah.
No.
So again,
They would have to go through.
They'd
all
have to
that.
go through all that.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And that's the only one I know about because I was involved in it.
Well, those are
Couple
big.
of
I mean,
different
that's
ways.
a big, there's a lot of water.
But that would fit that description.
It would, yeah. Yeah, and then we would have to agree that if it was an already established water right that we were doing the transfer for, that would be, the first and foremost, you must have an already interruptible junior water right associated with your municipality. Secondarily, you are a municipality. Third, we have enough water to be able to divert for. If you are a hydrant service that has impact within our pressure zone that is too expensive to overcome for for these issues that we've already put in our water policy manual for establishing crops or establishing grass or whatever it is, and then irrigation.
But using that description, WDFW would not fit in there then.
Exactly. So they would have to go and use one of our fill stations and hook it up to something and neutralize it, or however they'd have to do it. Again, you're going to, I mean, at that point, if you say it's an amount issue, then you could have like 500 applicants for water. I mean, that I think is something that I'm nervous about, is just because it's a little bit here and here. I mean, then you're talking about an administrative costs that are just astronomical.
Right. That's the whole crux of this whole thing. Like, we could have people coming out like that, which is, it's ecology and DFW. It's not, it is a state, they're state agencies. And so I don't know what they have as a backup, for irrigation and it's also for, dust control for construction. So yeah, that one specifically we'll end up talking about, because we'll come forward with, they're requesting.
They
it,
could use
and
the
it's
bulk water fill station.
I think we need to be really careful about, these are the pockets of customers we've already established ourselves and we have invested in our infrastructure. The emergency transfers to irrigation districts was not, I mean, yes, it was a emergency transfer. We need to define them as customers. Okay. And we do say that we will do wholesale service to municipal customers. So again, I think we need to figure out what the framework is, how simple do we want to keep it? And what do we want to have a priority? And do we want to have a full-time employee who's dealing with all these transfers? Because it's going to be a lot of work and a lot of meters.
It's another thing that'd be useful for me would be, George, as long as we're doing book reports, just the just where the friction exists between the treated and the untreated, right? So in my mind, I just keep coming back to the untreated aspect of this. And so certainly there are hydrant and all other kinds of options and for ag water. But in my mind, the proof of concept that we did was all untreated, right? Pulling straight from the river. And so, and the pulling straight from the river, in my mind, they're similar, and clearly because they're coming from our overall water right, but the processes and potentially policies would be different. Yes. Because the costs are different. And it would be interesting also to look at, to turn around and say, even with the partners or the customers that we have in that space, to be able to say, if this is all that we have, what is the value of that for you in the, not to drive up the cost, but to actually put, I mean, if we turn around, if the value of that water on the crops is such that it pays to move that water over, then maybe we have an assumption that they wouldn't want to pay a certain amount, or that there's an administrative burden that they don't want to bear, when in fact it may be very valuable to pay for that certainty. I guess that's an aspect of that, to be able to say, if we just ran an untreated water company, and again, not getting into not from a market perspective, but we were to put together to say some kind of a program around that, so that we could turn around and say that we have exhausted the opportunity. We've identified this untreated asset. We've tested it in the market. We've tested it with partners, and this is what it's worth, and this is how it'll work moving forward. Saying, based on what we've learned over the last 3 years, here's how that would work.
I don't think that I personally would not like to entertain any potential customer that does not already have a water right themselves. I think you're getting into a scenario in which,
right. I'm not saying that we could, that's we just say a qualified customer in that pool has to have the water right. I mean, there's a whole bunch of qualifications that we can put it to say, in order to qualify for this program, here are your requirements. And top of the list would be, you have to have a
Junior water right that directly is.
yeah, an unexecuted water right. And you're coming to us to execute it. And here's what it's worth.
I do still think it's worth it, you know, if we're, you know, we all agree on these criteria and yet we already have a customer base that has, you know, achieved the amount that we're able to distribute, then what's the point of, you know, then what?
Well, so two, one's fairness and the other's economics. If we turn around and say that in all fairness, the three that got in, that's awesome. They're part of the proof of concept. But if there are others who are willing to pay, that are all equally qualified and are willing to pay more, then we owe that to the ratepayers because we have to optimize that asset.
We had one customer that came up after the first transfers were already in place. And we said,
That would be a
we
difficult
said, just
and legal.
wait, we're trying to figure this out.
Yeah, fraught with peril to turn around and tell somebody that they can't play because they didn't get here soon enough.
But I think your whole process, you know, if we lay it out.
Yeah, do
know,
you qualify, right?
You have to
hit all
have a
these-
water right.
yeah.
You have to be a municipality. You have to be a burden on our treated water system in
Well,
order to
I think-
qualify. I think that's all defendable.
I think so. too.
But it has, yes, and we need to capture, codify, right, to be able to say,
Yeah.
this is the program. And
Yeah,
here's
I
what it
think
means to
that's-
qualify, and here's what it means.
I think that's
So-
where we're kind of heading here.
You might get a list of criteria that isn't achievable by each customer, right? Like if you include enough,
Well,
you
yeah.
might do these three, but not those two. And then, then you're left with, okay, well, then you're ranking and prioritizing the different items.
As a matter of policy, I feel like we could, as a matter of statute, defer.
That just creates, yeah.
Pete's gonna be all over this, right? So make a lot of work for him on this, but I think that's actually not also, in order to score, somebody's application, to be able to say, here's how you rate because of what you bring to the word problem. If the word problem is that we want to optimize the asset and you want to put it to the highest best use in the economy and in the community, and we're as a commission get to decide that, and that's especially when it's a gradable scale, to be able to say, here's what you bring and why you get what you basically justify it. And I don't think we have to do it every year. I just think we have to do it once.
Well, you could get new people.
No, right.
Coming through
No,
every
but
year.
to set the scale, we don't have to litigate it
okay.
every year. We just say, here's how that gets scored. And
But I do
Okay.
want to full circle back to the conversation regarding our policy manual and the policies that are already in place. I want us to really lean heavily into that and also analyze, our water bulk filling stations, who are we servicing, fire hydrant, who are we servicing, and then the wholesale municipal transfers that we already have. I mean, not transfer, but wholesale side of municipal to municipal relations, like that we already have laid out. So I want to make sure that we are leaning into current policy to help guide our discussion moving forward.
There's the challenge with that, one of the challenges with that is that I think a lot of that was written before we contemplated doing transfers. And so we've been doing it for 3 years. I think we've got a good handle on how it works and what makes sense. I think there might be some language in there that was maybe not intended for this purpose, but it doesn't mean you can't revise policy, right? Policy, it's a policy manual and it's something that the board goes through to change, but
I to your point, I just don't, and it's been a while since I've been in there, but I don't remember anything about the untreated.
There isn't anything that specifically
Right.
speaks
Yeah.
to
So
untreated.
it can be
Right.
informed by that policy, but
That's-
this is a whole, this is
That's my point is
a
that
different business
there
model.
will be the creation of another policy or a subsection or a revision
Yes.
of the current policy. But if we're utilizing the current structure of that policy to guide the decision making, I think it will be a more fruitful and equitable conversation moving forward instead of, well, I like these people and these
Well-
people need it. And I want to make them water market because I want us to make more
Yeah.
money on this because we can make $1.2 million on treated water. Like, I don't want to be in that conversation because then I don't feel like the intent, we're getting back to what the intent of the original transfers were, which was to help the irrigation districts in a time of emergency and
yeah.
drought. Like, let's get back to why we did this in the first place. And that was it. It was, we're gonna not wait for that declaration of emergency because it's a day late and $1 short because by then the crops are already ruined. We're getting ahead of that because we know it is a possibility and it is an insurance policy more so than anything else in their eyes, right? It's an insurance policy. It is that guarantee that if I plant something that I have the water that on good flows within the river, that I will make sure that that succeeds. So I want to get back to the root of where we started with these conversations so many years ago, that it was for emergency transfers, for drought conditions, for our irrigation districts. That is where it began.
Well, if I could just add real quick to that, Commissioner, this pilot program has been outside of a drought, and every summer the river drops below the minimum in-stream flows every summer. So this is in play regardless of emergency drought. If someone has a water right that is junior to the Skagit River in-stream flow rule, they don't have water in the summer.
Understood. My point being is to why we started down this road in the first place, and that was to be more proactive for these drought conditions that we knew were becoming more and more frequent, involving the irrigation districts themselves. So the original transfer we were doing, we were waiting for the drought declaration and then doing the transfer. We were being proactive with the same customer base for the untreated water and being proactive over the last 3 years, with the addition of Skagit Valley Farms being the only other addition to that. So I just, again, back to the intent, and understood climate change is definitely changing the way that our.
Well, that's the situation regardless. It has been for as long as the river's been measured. As far as I know, Jenna might have better info, but in modern times, it's every year, and that's the natural condition below those levels.
But we were not engaging in this conversation.
I'm just
saying that we were not engaging in this until the drought condition had been legally established prior to this.
Yeah, that's what started it. Yeah.
Yes.
What else would be useful?
Do I hear a motion? No, just kidding.
Yeah.
No, I don't want one.
All right. Well, lots to think about.
Yeah, I wrote a lot of questions down. So I think doing some, reading, some research and responding to those, I think would be helpful, just so we can all hear the same thing. So those are the kinds of things that we'd bring back at the next meeting.
All right. Great. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So got some information here. Public Works Board, the award letter. Thank you for putting that in there.
Yeah.
Budget actual. Commissioner comments.
None.
I have none.
I have none either. So with that, we will adjourn at 6:08.